AITA, my boyfriend, made me pay everywhere for him and then made me pay for his friends at the cafe. I decided to pay him back with the same. When I first met Jake, I was 18 and fresh out of high school, with nothing more than a part-time babysitting gig to keep me afloat. Jake, on the other hand, was 20 and had a steady job working at a local tech company. He was the kind of guy who exuded confidence, a bit older, worldly in a way that I found irresistible. From the moment we started dating, he made it clear that he wanted to take care of me. And not just in the emotional sense, he wanted to financially provide as well. In the beginning, it was like something out of a fairy tale. I'd always heard about relationships where the guy was so generous, and here I was, living it. Jake would pick me up in his car, take me out to dinner, and insist on paying every single time. "Don't worry about it," he'd say with a smile, waving away my half-hearted attempts to reach for the bill. "I've got you." It wasn't just the dinners, though. Jake would surprise me with little gifts, nothing extravagant, but thoughtful things that showed he was paying attention. A book he knew I wanted to read, a piece of jewelry that caught my eye when we were out shopping, or tickets to a concert he knew I'd love. Every time I tried to protest, he'd just shake his head. "You deserve it," he'd say, and I believed him. It felt good to be taken care of, to be cherished in that way. After about 6 months of dating, Jake brought up the idea of moving in together. I was thrilled. I mean, what could be better than waking up next to the person you love every day? At first, I was hesitant. I didn't have a real job, and I didn't want to be a burden. But Jake was insistent. "Babe, you don't need to worry about that. I'm doing well at work, and I can cover the rent and bills. You can focus on figuring out what you want to do." It sounded like a dream, and I was too in love to see any red flags. So, I moved in with him. Our apartment was small, but it was ours. We spent the first few months decorating it together, turning it into a cozy little space where we could start our life as a couple. Jake continued to handle all the expenses, just like he'd promised. It felt like a real partnership, even if I wasn't contributing financially. But then, slowly, things started to shift. At first, it was just a minor inconvenience. Jake would forget his wallet at home or say he'd left his card in the car when we were out shopping. "Hey, can you cover this for now? I'll pay you back when we get home," he'd say. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, he'd been so generous with me, and it seemed only fair that I step up now and then. But as time went on, those little requests became more frequent. We'd go out to dinner, and Jake would suddenly remember that he needed to pay a bill or that he was short on cash. "Can you get this one? I'll make it up to you next time," he'd say. I didn't mind, at least, not at first. I mean, we were living together now, and that meant supporting each other, right? What really started to bother me, though, was the change in Jake's attitude. The more I paid, the less grateful he seemed. It became almost routine. He'd ask me to cover something, I'd pay, and there'd be no acknowledgement, no offer to pay me back. It was as if he'd come to expect it, but I still brushed it off, telling myself that relationships were about give and take. He'd done so much for me in the beginning, and this was just me returning the favor. But then, things escalated. Jake started asking me to cover bigger expenses: his online shopping, our grocery bills, even his portion of the rent. "I'm a little tight this month," he'd say. "Can you help me out? I'll pay you back when I get paid." But that payback never came. Instead, the requests just kept coming. I started to feel the strain on my finances. I didn't have a steady job, just that part-time babysitting gig, and my savings were quickly dwindling. I began to feel anxious every time we went out, wondering if Jake would ask me to pay again, worrying about how much was left in my bank account. I tried to bring it up with him, but he always had a way of turning it around. "You're acting like I never paid for anything," he'd say, frustrated. "Remember all those dinners I took you to, the trips we went on? I spent a lot of money on you, and I never complained." He wasn't wrong. I did remember. And that's what made it so hard to push back. I felt like I owed him, like I was in some kind of debt because of all the things he'd done for me in the past. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the growing resentment inside me. It wasn't about the money, it was about the way he made me feel, like my only value in the relationship was financial. The turning point came one afternoon when Jake asked me to buy him a new phone. His old one was still working, but he wanted the latest model. "I'll pay you back when I get my bonus," he promised, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. I hesitated, trying to think of a way to say no without causing a fight. But before I could, Jake snapped, "What's your problem? You act like you're broke or something. I've done so much for you, this is the least you could do for me." His words cut deep. I didn't want to buy the phone, but I felt trapped. So, I did it, and that night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd let things get this far. I loved Jake, but I didn't recognize the person he'd become or the person I'd become, for that matter. I was constantly anxious, walking on eggshells around him, afraid to say no, afraid of the arguments that would follow. I tried talking to him about it, but every time, it ended the same way. He'd get defensive, telling me I was being selfish or ungrateful. He'd remind me of all the times he'd paid for me, making it sound like I was the one who was in the wrong. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I really was being unreasonable, if I was expecting too much from him. The final straw came when Jake told me he was thinking about quitting his job. He said he was tired of the 9-to-5 grind and wanted to take some time off to figure out what he really wanted to do. "I'll just need you to cover things for a few months until I get back on my feet," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was stunned. Here I was, struggling to make ends meet, and he was asking me to support him completely. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But when I tried to express my concerns, he dismissed them, saying I was overreacting, that he'd find another job soon enough and that everything would be fine. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling once again, but this time with a new resolve. I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep letting Jake walk all over me, using the past as leverage to manipulate me into paying for everything. I had to do something, even if it meant risking the relationship. The next morning, I sat Jake down and told him how I felt. I told him I couldn't keep supporting him financially, that I needed him to step up and start contributing again. I tried to be calm, to explain that it wasn't just about the money, it was about feeling like an equal partner in the relationship. But Jake didn't take it well. He accused me of not loving him, of being selfish and materialistic. He said I didn't appreciate everything he'd done for me, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. The argument escalated quickly, with Jake raising his voice, calling me names, and storming out of the apartment. As Jake stormed out of the apartment, the door slamming behind him with a force that echoed through the small space, I sat there in stunned silence. My mind was racing, replaying the argument over and over, trying to make sense of it all. How had we gotten here? Just a few months ago, we were so in love, so in sync. But now, it felt like everything was falling apart. And the worst part, I couldn't shake the gnawing guilt that had settled in my chest. I felt like I'd pushed him too hard, like maybe I was being unreasonable after all. Maybe I should have just let it go, kept quiet, and avoided the confrontation. I hated the thought of Jake being out there, angry and alone, all because of something I'd said. My anxiety began to spiral, and before I knew it, I was reaching for my phone. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over his contact. I knew I shouldn't be the one to reach out after all. He was the one who'd stormed out, who'd refused to listen. But the thought of losing him, of being alone, terrified me. I loved Jake, despite everything, and the idea of him not coming back was too much to bear. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I called him. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. With each ring, my heart pounded harder in my chest, a mix of fear and anticipation. Finally, on the 4th ring, he picked up. "What?" His voice was cold, clipped, but there was a hint of something else. There's something that made me think maybe, just maybe, he was waiting for this call. "Jake," I began, my voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. Can you please come back? Let's talk about this. I don't want to fight." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought he might hang up. But then he sighed, a heavy, resigned sound. "Fine, I'll come back. But we need to talk about how you're treating me, Sophia. This isn't fair to me." "I know," I said quickly, desperate to smooth things over. "We'll talk about it. Just come back, okay?" Another pause, then a gruff, "I'm on my way." And with that, he hung up. When Jake returned, the tension was palpable. He barely looked at me as he walked in, heading straight for the kitchen to grab a beer. I followed him, unsure of what to say, how to bridge the gap that had suddenly grown between us. "I'm sorry," I repeated, hoping to break the ice. "I didn't mean to make you feel like I don't appreciate everything you've done for me. I do, Jake, I really do." He took a long swig of his beer, then finally looked at me. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hardness in his eyes that made me uneasy. "You need to stop acting like I'm some kind of burden, Sophia. I've always taken care of you, and now that I need you to step up, you're acting like it's too much to ask." I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a hand to stop me. "I'm serious. You need to start pulling your weight. This relationship isn't just about you, it's about us." Seeing my compliance, Jake seemed to relax a little. He took another sip of his beer, then said, "Why don't we do something fun today? Get out of the apartment, clear our heads." The suggestion caught me off guard, but I was eager to make things right. "Sure," I agreed, forcing a smile. "What do you have in mind?" "I was thinking we could meet up with some of the guys, grab a bite to eat, maybe hang out for a bit, just relax." I hesitated. Jake's friends were always a bit much for me. They had this way of making me feel like an outsider, like I didn't quite belong. But I didn't want to cause another argument, so I nodded. "That sounds nice." Jake's mood brightened immediately. "Great, I'll text them, let them know we're coming." A couple of hours later, we found ourselves at a trendy little cafe downtown, the kind of place that served overpriced lattes and artisanal sandwiches. Jake's friends were already there when we arrived. Mark, who I'd met a few times before, and two other guys I didn't know very well. They greeted Jake with hearty slaps on the back, a round of laughs and jokes that made me feel even more out of place. We ordered food, and Jake seemed to be in a great mood, laughing and joking with his friends like nothing had happened. I tried to relax, to enjoy the moment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way Jake kept glancing at me, or the fact that he hadn't really touched me since he'd come back. I pushed the thoughts aside, telling myself I was just being paranoid. When the bill finally came, I felt a small wave of relief. The lunch had gone better than I'd expected, and I was ready to head home, to put this whole day behind us. But then Jake did something that made my heart drop. As the waiter placed the check on the table, Jake reached for it, then casually slid it over to me. "Sophia, why don't you take care of this?" I froze, my smile faltering. I glanced at the check, then back at Jake, hoping I'd misunderstood. "What?" "You heard me," he said, his tone light but with an edge that sent a shiver down my spine. "You can cover this, right?" Before I could respond, Mark spoke up. "Hey, man, I can pay for my stuff. You don't need to do that." One of the other guys nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's no big deal. We can all chip in." But Jake shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. No, it's fine. Sophia's got it. Right, babe?" I could feel the color draining from my face. This wasn't just about the money, this was about control, about Jake asserting his power over me in front of his friends. I wanted to say no, to stand up for myself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself nodding, my hands trembling as I reached for my wallet. Mark looked uncomfortable. "Dude, seriously, it's okay. We all ordered a lot. It's not fair to make her pay for everything." But Jake was insistent. "She doesn't mind. Right, Sophia?" I forced a smile, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll pay." The tension at the table was palpable as I handed over my cart to the waiter. I could feel the eyes of Jake's friends on me, could sense their discomfort, but I was too humiliated to meet their gazes. The waiter returned with the receipt, and I signed it, feeling a wave of nausea as I realized just how much the bill had come to. It was more than I'd spent on myself in months. As we left the cafe, Jake's friends mumbled their goodbyes, clearly eager to leave the awkwardness behind. Jake, on the other hand, seemed pleased with himself, his arm draped casually over my shoulder as we walked back to the car. "You did good today, babe," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. See, this is how relationships work. We take care of each other. I didn't respond, couldn't respond. All I could think about was the look on Mark's face when Jake had insisted I pay, the way his friends had tried to stop him, and how powerless I'd felt to do anything about it. The morning after our awkward lunch with Jake's friends, I woke up feeling drained. The events of the previous day kept replaying in my mind, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. I couldn't forget the way Jake had casually pushed the bill towards me, or how his friends had looked at me with a mix of pity and disbelief. It was humiliating, and I was tired of feeling like I was constantly bending over backward to keep Jake happy. I stared at the ceiling, trying to shake off the lingering resentment, but it wasn't easy. For so long, I'd been walking on eggshells around Jake, doing everything I could to avoid conflict, but yesterday had been a breaking point. Something inside me had shifted, and I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to take a stand, to show Jake that I wasn't going to be his doormat anymore. As I got out of bed, an idea started to form in my mind. It was a little bold, a little risky, but it felt right. I wasn't just going to stand up to Jake, I was going to show him exactly how it felt to be on the receiving end of his behavior. After a quick shower, I grabbed my phone and texted my friends, inviting them out to a cafe that afternoon. I hadn't seen them in a while, and I knew they'd be up for it. As I sent the message, a sense of nervous excitement bubbled up inside me. This was going to be different. I was going to take control for once. When Jake finally woke up, he seemed in a good mood, completely oblivious to the turmoil I'd been going through. He gave me a sleepy smile and pulled me into a hug. "Morning, babe," he mumbled, kissing the top of my head. "What's the plan for today?" I hesitated for a moment, but then I took a deep breath and smiled back at him. "Actually, my friends invited us to a cafe today. I thought it would be nice for us to go together." Jake looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, sounds good. Who's coming?" I rattled off the names of a few of my closest friends, the ones who knew me well enough to understand that something was up, but who would play along if needed. Jake seemed unfazed, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was just relieved that I wasn't bringing up yesterday's fiasco. As we got ready to leave, I texted my friends again, telling them they could order whatever they wanted and that I'd take care of the bill. They responded with a mix of excitement and confusion, but I didn't give them any more details. I wanted this to play out naturally. We arrived at the cafe a little later than planned, but my friends were already there, chatting and laughing at a corner table. They greeted Jake warmly, though I could tell they were curious about why I'd been so vague earlier. I gave them a reassuring smile, hoping they'd trust me enough to go along with it. The atmosphere was light, the conversation flowing easily as we ordered food and drinks. Jake was his usual charming self, joking around and making everyone laugh. For a moment, it almost felt like old times, like we were just a regular couple enjoying a day out with friends. But I couldn't forget what I was planning, and that kept me on edge, waiting for the right moment. When the bill finally arrived, I could feel my heart racing. This was at the moment of truth. The waiter placed the check on the table, and I saw Jake start to reach for it out of habit. But before he could grab it, I quickly picked it up, glancing at the total before slipping it back into the folder. "Don't worry, guys, I've got this," I said, trying to sound casual. Jake looked at me, surprised. "Are you sure, babe? That's a lot for just you to cover." I gave him a sweet smile, my stomach twisting with nerves. "Actually, I was hoping you could pay this time, Jake, you know, like a little treat for everyone." His eyes widened, and I could see the shock on his face. This wasn't what he'd expected at all. "What? But you said you'd take care of it." I nodded, keeping my tone light. "I did, but I thought it would be nice if you paid instead. You've been so great about helping out lately, and I figured it's your turn to treat us." My friends exchanged glances, clearly sensing that something was up. One of them, Sarah, spoke up. "It's okay, Sophia. We can pay for ourselves. It's really no big deal." But I shook my head. "No, really, it's fine. Jake's got it, don't you, honey?" I could see the discomfort in Jake's eyes, the way he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This wasn't how he'd expected things to go at all. He opened his mouth to argue, but before he could say anything, I handed him the bill. "Please, Jake," I said softly, locking eyes with him. It would mean a lot to me. There was a long, tense silence as Jake stared at the check, his jaw clenched. My friends were watching us closely, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. I could feel the tension building, but I refused to back down. This was a test, a challenge to see if Jake would do for me what I'd done for him so many times before. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake sighed heavily and pulled out his wallet. He handed his card to the waiter, who quickly processed the payment and returned with the receipt. Jake signed it without a word, his face a mask of barely contained frustration. As we left the cafe, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. My friends, sensing the shift, quickly made their excuses and said their goodbyes. I could see the questions in their eyes, but I wasn't ready to explain everything just yet. I needed to deal with Jake first. The car ride home was silent, the air between us crackling with unresolved anger. I could feel the storm brewing, and I knew it was only a matter of time before Jake exploded. I braced myself, trying to stay calm, even as my own nerves threatened to overwhelm me. As soon as we walked through the door of our apartment, Jake turned to me, his eyes blazing with fury. "What the hell was that, Sophia? Why would you put me on the spot like that?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay composed. "I just thought it would be nice for you to treat everyone for once. Jake, I mean, you're always saying how relationships are about taking care of each other, right?" His face twisted in anger. "Don't play games with me, Sophia. You know damn well what you were doing. That bill was ridiculous." I crossed my arms, meeting his glare head-on. "It wasn't any more ridiculous than the bill I paid yesterday, Jake. You didn't seem to care then." "That's different," he snapped. "I paid for you so many times before." "And I was happy to repay the favor," I interrupted, my voice growing firmer. "But when you made me pay for your friends yesterday, that crossed a line, Jake. You put me in a position where I couldn't say no, and that's not fair. Relationships are supposed to be about equality, but lately, it feels like you're just taking advantage of me." Jake's anger seemed to falter for a moment, his expression shifting from rage to something more defensive. "I'm not taking advantage of you, Sophia. I just thought we were supposed to help each other out." "And we are," I said, softening my tone just a little. "But that doesn't mean I should be paying for everything. It doesn't mean I should feel like I'm being used. I love you, Jake, but I need you to understand that this isn't okay. I need you to start contributing more, to start treating me like an equal partner." There was a long silence as Jake processed what I was saying. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the way he was struggling to reconcile his own actions with the person he wanted to believe he was. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Fine," he muttered, his voice low. "I get it. I'll start paying more, okay. But don't ever pull that shit again, Sophia. That was humiliating." I nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. "I won't, as long as you don't put me in that position again. We need to be a team, Jake. We need to support each other, but it has to go both ways." Jake didn't say anything else, just nodded stiffly and headed to the bedroom. "I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. Am I AITA who did this to him?